Today, we are joined by a professional podcaster. He's helped over 100 clients launch their own podcast. He's been podcasting for over 8 years. You can find out more at podcastbuddy.co, or you can check out his app, poddex.com, where you can get the mobile app. Travis Brown, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Excited to be here.
Yeah, Travis, my pleasure. We were just kind of chatting a little bit before the episode started. We both love podcasting. Super, super powerful. I'm just kind of curious, Travis, how did you get into podcasting?
Sure. So my history, I've been a musician since I was 15 years old, and I used to actually tour the country like a gypsy, driving around. Before cell phones had maps on them, we took a Rand McNally, the big book map, and we would just drive around the country and play shows. So audio's always been a big part of my life. And when you're a musician, you want to learn how to record yourself so you can demo songs or record your own album. So I inevitably learned how to do audio for music. And then as you get older and you see all your peers around you getting jobs and health insurance and condos and cars, you decide, I'm going to grow up and get a big boy job. So eventually I gave in, I traded in my guitar to get a job, and I would commute an hour both ways to my desk job. And at some point, I stumbled along podcasts, and I would start listening to these podcasts, and I just got sucked into podcasting. But I realized some of these podcasts don't sound very good. And I was thinking, with my skill set, I think that I could actually make great sounding podcasts. So it just so happened I went to a networking event and met someone who wanted to start a podcast. Now, this is about 8 years ago. And I said, hey, listen, you have a really great brand going. Let me produce your podcast. And started with him. And he actually just got an HGTV show last week off of podcasting for the last 8 years. And from there, he told the client who told the client. I've never advertised my services, and I've helped over 100 people launch a podcast, and many of them have six-figure funnels just based off of the podcast alone for their business.
Wow. That is a really, really important story. Really awesome story too. Kind of similar to me. I mean, I started listening to podcasts, really enjoyed them, really loved them. And I just kind of started it. And what was kind of funny for me is when I was in college, I loved public speaking. I loved getting up in front of the class and presenting and speaking, but I just never really went down that lane. But once I started podcasting, I was like, wait a minute, I really love this. I really love this. You also brought up another thing, audio quality, right? I think in the past, when there wasn't a lot of competition in the podcast space, audio quality wasn't quite as important. But I think with every passing day, it becomes more and more important. So I'm kind of curious, in your experience, Travis, what are 3 ways that we can improve the quality of our audio?
Sure, absolutely. So I think that because podcasting is only audio for the most part. Now, I know some people are doing video like you do, which is awesome. But for the most part, podcasting just stands on one leg. It's an audio file that you're listening to. So you really want it to sound good and make it sound professional. So I think the first thing that people can do to make their podcast sound better is to take a look at their environment and see which microphone is right for you. So a lot of people go out and they buy a condenser microphone. And a condenser microphone is like your Blue Yeti, or there's other Audio Technica, but a condenser microphone is really suited for a specific environment. It's very sensitive. It's meant to pick up all the nuances used oftentimes in recording studios for vocalists. So if your room doesn't have anything to absorb reflection, you get a lot of room noise. And let's be honest, we don't all live in a recording studio. No. So I think that by figuring out in your room, like, hey, I could probably use a dynamic microphone. Now, most of the microphones on the market are dynamic microphones, and it's a less sensitive capsule, and it gives you more of a radio broadcast, that pillowy, radio sound, and it's much easier to work with in post-production, and you don't have to worry about the landscapers showing up and the air conditioning kicking on as much, and you can really get a great sound from even like a $50 mic. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on a microphone. So I think that's probably the first thing people can do, is get the right mic.
I want to interject a little bit on that, because like Travis is saying, picking up a dynamic mic is probably easier than some of the other options, like recording in your closet or putting a bunch of comforters in your bathtub or your shower, right? Because I've seen that happen before.
I'm sure you've seen in all the Facebook groups, people are building these little like forts around their microphone. And I always laugh because I just say, like, the amount of money you spent building that little fort at Home Depot, you could have just bought a $50 microphone, and you wouldn't even need to have that. But everyone's on their own journey. So I don't comment, I don't say anything. I just let people do their thing. But yeah, the dynamic microphone, they're affordable and more than ever. And that's the really way to start. Now, the second way is to really sound good is to actually practice using your microphone. So don't go get a microphone and immediately record a podcast with somebody. Spend 30 minutes in your environment, set it up, figure out which way you can face it to make sure that it sounds the best. A good rule of thumb is generally about 3 fingers away from the microphone is going to give you that nice proximity effect. Now, if I get farther away, you're going to see that, like, obviously it's picking up more of the room
Yep.
that I'm in, and that doesn't sound good. That sounds like I'm far away. Podcasting, you want to be right in the listener's ear, right? You're the little voice in their head. So spend just a little time figuring out how everyone's voice is different. So figure out how you sound good on that microphone and document your settings. Say, I've got the gain turned to level 7. I've got the microphone a little off axis so I don't get plosives, things like that. And that can really set you up to have a great start, because then you know where you need to be at all times when you're podcasting.
You definitely want to be listening back to it too. I know when I first started, I recorded dozens of episodes, and I was listening back to them. I'm like, what is this clicking noise in the background? I'm telling you, Travis, I was killing myself to try to figure out where this clicking was. And it was actually coming from the chair I was sitting in. When I would shift my weight, it would make this little clinking noise, which is this kind of like white noise you don't even pay attention to under normal circumstances. Yeah. But for a podcast, it was very distracting. So listen back to your episodes, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's a big thing.
So absolutely. And yeah.
So what do you got for number 3 for us, Travis?
Number 3, I think, is just to learn how to minimally edit a podcast. So there's a bunch of different digital audio workstations. It doesn't really matter which one you use, but I would highly recommend learning how to cut the audio, move the audio, fade the audio. And editing, I think, is one of the most underrated parts of a podcast. Now, there's no problem with putting your podcast out there straight out just as is, but with a little bit of editing, you can start to craft something that is really great for the listener. Now, people oftentimes over edit, they'll cut out silence. Like, I think that there's something to be said with a dramatic pause, but just spending a little time listening back and editing it, remember, you're making the podcast for listeners. A lot of people they start making the podcast for themselves, which is great, but there's 2 ears on the other side of every podcast, and you want to make it optimal for them to consume and keep coming back for more.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. It's certainly a process of getting better every day with each episode. And like you said, sometimes over editing can drive you nuts. I mean, I do a pretty minimal amount of editing for my show, the way it's set up right now, both on YouTube video and on audio, pretty minimal. But there have been shows I've worked on where I just go in and I just go nuts, just really, really editing it. But it kind of drained me. Another just kind of a pro tip that I would throw out there, one of the things that I started doing was being much more thoughtful with the first 5 minutes of editing, because there's that magic moment that Pat Flynn always talks about where someone says, I'm going to listen to this, and they put it in their pocket, right? If you can hook them in the first 5 minutes, make that really, really polished, you maybe don't need to be quite as intensive on the back end. Have you ever thought about that?
I completely agree. I think that you've got between 30 seconds and 5 minutes to really get somebody to stick around for that episode. Yeah. So you really want to, make sure that they know what they're going to get in the episode. So you want to make sure that you're telling someone, hey, if you stick around, here's what you're going to get. And if they want that information, they can stay with you. And if they don't, it's okay. They can go do another episode, right? But you want to make sure that you don't spend too much time in the beginning just jabbering and doing small talk and talking about the weather. You want to get right into the meat. Like, I'll bring music back into this. So a lot of big producers will say, don't bore us, get us to the chorus, right? So all the pop songs, all the big songs on the radio typically start with the chorus. It's the most exciting part of the song. So if you think about your podcast, you want to start with something exciting to get people interested to stick around, and then unfold the story, and you can be a little more relaxed. But definitely what you said about the first 5 minutes is spot on.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm glad you enjoyed this episode. I've got several other episodes right here for you. Smash one of these videos to make sure that you don't miss out on the tips, tools, and tactics of industry experts. Let's take that side hustle full time. Smash one of these links.